While we're talking about Michael Knowles, I forgot to mention another kingdom is taking Thanksgiving off because we have this feeling that some of you will find something else to do rather than listen to another kingdom. So we're taking a break between 7. We got 3 episodes left, but we have a conversation, actually a very entertaining conversation, at least it was to me, that Knowles and I had about another kingdom. So we're posting that. It's up today for subscribers. Friday, it'll be available to all. So if you are sick of arguing with your relatives, you'll be able to listen to that instead. Knowles,
long time no see.
It's good to see you, pal. Hey, where you been?
I feel like it's been weeks. I was in Wisconsin. I was in Michigan. I was in New York about 15 times for about 20 minutes a clip.
Yeah.
I come back. We're in the Tora Bora cave still. That's great.
I know. I'm issuing videos like, you Satan, I will destroy you now. Were you at the University of Madison? Were you in Madison?
I was at University of Wisconsin Whitewater.
So you weren't in Madison?
I wasn't in Madison. I would have been tarred and feathered if I were in Madison.
Madison is great. It's such a beautiful city.
Really?
It's unbelievable.
I thought it was left of Lenin.
Well, it is a little left of Lenin. But we go in there and all we do is we talk to conservatives, so it's great.
Right.
But like, I have to say, the fact that they voted Scott Walker out of office, he transformed that city is so beautiful.
Well, this is what happens. The left goes in and destroys governments, and then the right comes in, fixes everything, and by the time there are no problems left, they say, what do we need this conservative for? There are no problems.
It's so true. It is so true. I mean, after Thatcher, they did it in England. After Reagan, they did it here. Churchill. I know. It's like this kind of weird cycle. It's almost as if nothing human is built to last.
I'm going to write that down. That's pretty good.
It's almost as if it's built into the mortal system. Another Kingdom is going great.
Yeah.
We're getting somewhere between 70 and 100,000 downloads every episode.
This is shocking.
Yeah.
This may mean that I, at some point in my life, could have another acting job.
You are now the most famous actor in America.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, despite all of Hollywood's
it's great. No, it is great. It's great. I mean, if this were a book, it would be a New York Times bestseller. I mean, that's
even at these speeches, I've been in Michigan or Wisconsin or wherever, and they'll come up and say, Michael, I love the show. And I say, oh, thank you so much. Did you catch yesterday's? They say, no, not your show. No. Another Kingdom. I love Another Kingdom. I say, okay, that's fair enough.
It's great. It's really amazing. Let's talk about Thanksgiving.
Things I'm thankful for, like Another Kingdom, absolutely.
And also the holiday itself.
That's right. The holiday itself, this is one of the most misunderstood and misrepresented holidays of all.
Let's hear it.
The main takeaways. First of all, the providence of it all. They arrive, the pilgrims. I actually have 4 ancestors of mine who were on the Mayflower. 1 was a pilgrim. He was a great and godly man. 3 were absolute degenerates, mutineers. 1 was the first guy executed for murder in America. It's a true story. Oh, yes, that's true.
That explains so much. Yes,
So I'm very interested in the Mayflower history. They arrive. They were delayed out of leaving Leiden. They were delayed out of leaving England.
Right.
There were conspiracies to prevent them even from leaving. They finally make it. They are blown hundreds of miles off course. They were aiming for New York. They didn't even end up in Massachusetts Bay. They ended up in this, after a little meandering, they ended up in Plymouth. They arrive at Plymouth. Almost immediately, within a matter of days, an Indian walks out of the woods and says, "Welcome, Englishmen."
That's a great story. I love that.
That's an unbelievable, and because they arrived and all of the fields were cleared. They were cleared for agriculture, but there was nobody there. There were white human bones because there had been a huge epidemic that had gone on, wiped out whole tribes. So Samoset was the Indian who came out and said, "Welcome, Englishmen." His English was a little broken. He then found another Indian who was being held prisoner by the sachem Massasoit, who would go on to have a long relationship with the Pilgrims. That Indian's name was Squanto.
Right.
Squanto comes out, speaks beautiful English. How did he speak beautiful English? Because he was kidnapped from the Patuxet tribe. He was brought to Spain. We don't know how long he lived in Spain for. He was a slave there. There is one story that actually Catholic missionaries and monks smuggled him out, got him to England, but it's unclear how he made it to England. He then lived in London, was talking with the Pilgrims about the streets of London, lived in London for a while. A good Englishman was able to send him back to Newfoundland. His entire tribe had been wiped out. Coincidentally, for the years that he was missing, his entire tribe, the Patuxets, were gone. He was the last one remaining. He makes it down. Massasoit holds him as a prisoner. The English arrive randomly on the shores. Pilgrims, he walks out and brokers an incredible diplomatic alliance
That's
between this guy, Massasoit.
It's such an amazing story. And this is a God-touched country. There's no question about it.
There's no, I mean, that is the simplest answer.
Yeah,
So that is the one.
It's Occam's razor, yeah.
So there's this incredible providence. They walk up, the Pilgrims have been starving. I mean, they've been, a lot of them are dying, some are committing suicide likely, and they find a bushel of corn, just a bushel of corn. So the first act of the Pilgrims in the New World was in fact an act of theft, but they quickly made it up to them. They formed an alliance.
Bastard white man.
I know, those awful white men, you know. They formed this alliance with Massasoit, and it really helps out Massasoit. It helps grow the Wampanoag Nation. They form a treaty to fight against some of the Wampanoag's enemies, and it really is beneficial to both of them. This is the second point I like to remind people about Thanksgiving. The Indians are people. They're people, they're men. They have interests, they have intellect, they have will, they have ability. They are real people. They're not little fairy creatures who were perfect or stupid or incapable. They're real men, and this alliance really helped both of these groups. I mean, they were so close. Edward Winslow, one of the Pilgrims, saved Massasoit's life. The chief sachem of the Wampanoags was on death's door. There were reports he was already dead. He comes in, scrapes his tongue, gives him a little medicine. He pops back to life, Massasoit. He tells the Pilgrims about an attack that the Massachusetts were led by, I think, Elizabeth Warren, were about to wage on the Pilgrims. And Massasoit gives some troops to go help fight the Massachusetts, puts them off. It was an amazing alliance. That alliance lasted until 1675, and it was because of a freak accident that it broke down. Massasoit died. He was still a good friend of the Pilgrims. His son, Alexander, the kids had Christian names. They were very close. His son Alexander died. He had been held, not captive, but he was being questioned by the Pilgrims over a land deal. He died shortly thereafter. There is no evidence that the Pilgrims killed him, but that guy's younger brother, King Philip, also known as Metacomet, was certain that the Pilgrims killed him. No evidence had happened, waged a brutal war, killed thousands of people, forever destroyed Pilgrim and Indian relations. It's very sad. This brings us to the third thing I like to remember about Thanksgiving. It's about gratitude, and we have no gratitude in the country anymore. We have no gratitude for our forefathers. We have no gratitude for the Indians who helped out our forefathers. That first Thanksgiving was a Thanksgiving. There wasn't a lot of food, but there were more Indians there than Pilgrims.
You know, it's funny. I've been watching Michelle Obama. She's out flogging her book, and I don't like to pick on first ladies. I think that's a hard job, and you don't run for anything. And you know. But I've been watching her flogging her book, and the thing about Michelle Obama, she's actually she's lived an admirable life in a lot of ways. She starts out really working class, very working class.
Tough upbringing.
Tough upbringing, but she's got family. She's got, married parents who support her. They got good values. They put her in, she goes to Princeton, I think. Yeah. So she's actually like an admirable character. The reason I find her unappealing is no gratitude.
That's right.
Where is the gratitude? When she said that thing, this is the first time I've ever been proud of my country. What about all the time that, I mean, she's a black woman who's the first lady, beloved of most of the people and all this. Where is the gratitude?
She was talking to Oprah the other day, complaining that the Obamas had to pay for their meals in the White House. She said every criticism of her is because of racism. This is a woman who has gotten further than virtually anybody in all of history.
She had all the breaks.
She got all the breaks.
I mean, all the breaks in the sense that she had the family, they were working class people.
Talent meets opportunity, of course. Nobody's saying she's not, she didn't work or wasn't talented.
And it's just a little bit of gratitude and grace, but everybody is taught this kind of resentment, like that they're oppressed. It's supposed to make them feel like heroes. It just makes them feel like bitter old men.
Well, that's exactly right. It's this school of resentment. It's this. You see this in literature, you see it in history, and you certainly see this with our founding fathers. These were good men. These were incredible men. Many of these Indians were very good men too, in certain circumstances, and sometimes sheer accident broke down some of those relations. That's true. But these are real people, and to stand on the shoulders of these men and spit on them as though they were so awful and we can judge them from our perch is absurd. That first Thanksgiving was a tough Thanksgiving. Half of the Pilgrim, half of the Mayflower passengers had died through that harsh winter. There wasn't a lot of food. There's actually a coincidence here. Part of the reason for that was that they lived under communal socialist living standards for that first Thanksgiving of 1621. Same thing with the Thanksgiving, the harvest feast of 1622. By 1623, Governor Bradford said, we're not going to do this socialism anymore. Bradford said, quote, that this communal living was found to breed much confusion and discontent and retard much employment. For the young men that were most able and fit for labor and service did repine that they should spend their time and strength to work for other men's wives and children without any recompense. So they got rid of socialism.
Discovery, yeah.
Guess what happened?
Yeah.
All of the, there was utter prosperity. And so that third one, 1623, was a great feast. And it was a feast to celebrate industriousness. It was a feast to celebrate alliances. It was a feast to celebrate the providence that brought them to this incredible land, this new world that led to this now the greatest country in the history of the world.
You know, it's funny, you think about, there's only two races in America that have ever been persistently treated different as races, as different, right? Everybody else, the Jews come in, everybody hates them. But then it's like, all right, now you're Americans.
The Irish, the Italians.
The Italians, right? Everybody hates them. But then it's like, join the crowd. Blacks and Indians,
right?
The Native Americans. The Native Americans, you know, it is true they got screwed on deals with the government. But who doesn't get screwed on deals with the government? That's why we hate the government, right?
The definition of a deal with the government. Yeah.
But if at some point they had said, you know what, you can't beat them, join them, take the land, give me a house, that's it. They wouldn't, there's so much poverty on those reservations. There's so much alcoholism. There's so much dysfunction. You think like, what's the benefit here that you're holding on to some ancient compact of land? If they just said, okay, you're Americans, forget the rest of it, you know?
And there's so much misunderstanding on this. I know that we like to pretend that Elizabeth Warren is the first Indian at Harvard. The first Indian to graduate from Harvard was a Wampanoag in the year 1665.
Yeah.
Predates the country by a century and a decade.
Yeah, Jefferson admired the Indians.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, and also there's a long tradition of Christianity. Many of these Indians embraced Christianity when the Pilgrims arrived. This persists to this day among the descendants of the Wampanoags. But you don't hear this. You hear only an ideological, anti-Western history, revisionist history, and you don't understand how all of this came together. It makes us think that when people are talking about the history of the Indians, the history of Thanksgiving, they don't care about the history of the Indians. They just want any little sliver of history that will attack their own forefathers. That is a bizarre psychological glitch, and it does unfortunately seem to be getting worse among Americans.
It's strange too that the same people who feel that someone from Honduras has the right to just walk into our country and take it over, blame us for walking into the Indians' country. You know, maybe the Indians should have built a wall.
That's right. You know, and the people who come in, they're not even giving us beads. You know, they're not even giving us. I'd be happy to give up Manhattan at this point.
It is a really interesting thing. I mean, if we could, racism will get into the human system any way it can.
Right.
So if like once like stone bigots are sort of outre, the left brings it back in through the back door. You know, they just will not let that racism go.
That's exactly right. Even at periods where we like to think that this racism was just always there.
Yeah,
it was so, but really it wasn't. Sometimes it ebbs and flows. There wasn't very much racism when the Pilgrims first landed. In fact, there wasn't terribly much racism on certain islands where Christopher Columbus landed. That racism developed over time. Sometimes it ebbs, sometimes it flows. But the left seems so insistent on bringing it back, on constantly harping on it.
They can't let it go. They
real
cannot
shame.
let it go. It is a shame. I mean, truly. I mean, I know I'm thankful. I feel like I won the lottery of life being born here. I mean, living through the time I lived through, which was one of America's greatest time. There's always been this kind of conflict. There's always been conflict. There's always been upheaval and chaos. But the country has never, I don't think anybody on earth has ever been as free as an American at this moment, and that's really
as free, as open to, as having justice available to them, as prosperous, as able to educate themselves and better themselves. It is unbelievable. We are living in the 0.0000001% of fortunate people in the history of the world.
It really is true.
And what do? We complain.
It's good to see you. I'm glad you're back.
Good to see you. Me too.
I'll talk to you again.